Good morning, everyone. My name is Mimi Plochet, and I'm the Artistic Director of the Chicago International Film Festival. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to our coffee talk this morning. Joining us will be Director of Memory House by João Paulo Miranda Maria. João Paulo, welcome.
Good morning. Thanks so much.
Thank you for joining us. So you're in Paris right now, so it's late afternoon for you. So I appreciate you being here on a Friday evening for you. So I just wanted today to be a casual conversation about your film. For me, it's probably, I shouldn't say this, but one of my favorite films in the festival. And it's a film that after I watched it, it just kind of has stayed with me, not just in terms of the narrative, but really also the imagery and the feeling that remained with me after. So I was hoping, I know this is your first feature. First, if you could just give a quick introduction to the film for audiences who haven't seen it yet.
Yes, it's my first feature film, and I am from Brazil. I am specifically from the countryside of the state of São Paulo, a rich part of Brazil. And I grew up there in a family who worked with restaurant, for example, very simple family. And but I always saw all the contrast between the society, between the rich ones, the bourgeoisie, and in the same time the poor ones who came from the north. The north is more poor, so comparing the south, it's more rich, more European descendants, and the north more African, Indian descendants, for example, in general way. And I grew up seeing all this kind of situation. So my friends, my first girlfriend, like for example, she was black, and and I saw a lot of story of preconcept and intolerance in my region and in the south. So of course, this always kept it in me when I started to make films. I started in a very simple way, just to tell a little about my story. I created one collective group in my city called Kino Olho, inspired in Dziga Vertov, and I started to study with people in the community to study, see films like a cine club, and talk about the films. And in the end of each session, we made one kind of filming essays that I call by this name, and we started to make with cell phone move camera. So very simple and really to build one mature mind behind the camera and the way to see the cinema. So was my start, and then I started to make short films, and without any kind of budget. For example, my first short film I made with more or less $300.
Okay.
And I made the film and finished the film in my house and sent it to one festival, very famous one, was the Festival of Cannes, and I sent the DVD right in hand. The name of the film was Command Action. And I sent the film, and the film entered in the Critics Week selection in 2015. And then I thought that was one kind of lucky, and I made a second one, but with less money, with $100, and the second one came for the official competition in Cannes the next year in 2016, and then I started to make a third one that I went to Venice in the next year, so it was like 3 consecutive years. I participated, I started to write this feature film, this script in 2015 when I came to the first time in France to be part of one project with support of Critics Week.
Okay.
And after in Cine Fondation residence in Paris. So I wrote the film here in Paris, and then I came back in the last year to shoot all the film in the south of Brazil. and finished here in France because it was one co-production between Brazil and France. And then the film was not supposed, but was selected to be in the official competition in Cannes this year.
Right.
But of course, the festival didn't happen, and then after the film was screened in other festivals, and now in Chicago, it's a great honor to be here. So thank you so much. It's a simple resume of my story.
Yes. Well, so I mean, I think it's a really inspiring story, and I think very inspiring for a lot of young filmmakers or aspiring filmmakers, because essentially you're self-taught and you grew up with this love of cinema and working especially with the community. So I guess one of my questions would be, I'm going to come back to the film and kind of the direct kind of inspirations for it, but as a filmmaker, I guess, what are the films or who are the other directors that you feel a particular affinity with?
Oh, for me, I really liked so much the films, the filmmakers who came from vanguards, different movements, are very auteur cinema. So, of course, in Brazil, to tell about Brazil, of course, I love so much, for example, Mario Peixoto, who made Limite, one very strong film of our history. And of course, Glauber Rocha, a very radical, very strong one, very artistic in outer way, and politic too. And then, of course, Eduardo Coutinho, one documentary filmmaker, very interesting in Brazil. And of course, now we have great names in Brazil going. Of course, we are living a very complicated moment from the government point of view, but telling about the artistic point of view, we have very talents coming up, and so to me it's very interesting to came now with my first feature film and came in a way very strong. For me, cinema, it's not a simple entertainment, it's not a simple story. So that's why that sometimes, of course, the film will be seen more like cinema than one story. Right. So it's not one simple kind of narrative. Of course, the film, sometimes I try to describe and tell the film like one spiritual ritual journey. So you will go in, enter the film, a lot of zoom and traveling to really put the audience entering in one world, very different, one dimension, one Brazil very different, very far from the stereotype tropical paradise of Rio de Janeiro. So it's very different of this kind of place. The film passed more in the south, and everything it's real. The people maybe will think that it's so surreal and so surrealistic, the film, but everything it's real, the movements. And the film, it's about one old man who comes from the north, and he will work in the south in a very, very conservative, fascist, and intolerant society. It's a metaphor of what we are seeing now in Brazil. And this old man came from the north, from this poor area. He needs to fight, and he will use all his roots and all his past to bring one force, more surrealistic way maybe to the audience, but it's a very a ritual and a very religious way. Sometimes I remember one filmmaker that I always say about him, Bresson, who said that the filmmaker is the one who brings the invisible to visible. So for me, it's always I'm looking for to find how I can put something that the audience cannot see in the screen, something that they will feel the presence of something with the texture in the image, and of course from the sound too.
So, that's a good point. Right now, we actually have Lily joining us. So, because I actually think that relates to her film as well. So I'd like to welcome to our chat, Lily Horvath. So welcome, Lily. How are you? So Lily, this is Gianpaolo.
Hello, Lily.
Hi.
And both of your films are competing in the New Directors Competition this year. And Lily's film is Preparations to Be Together for an Unknown Period of Time. So Lily, welcome. So I don't know if, I think you just heard Giampaolo talking about his film, and I maybe want to go off that point, the Bresson quote about a film's making the things visible, the unseen visible, and one of the things that I think is very, I guess, specific. Your films are very different, but I think that one similarity is the way in which they both kind of engage the audience in the film and take you in and bring you into a world that you as an audience have to bring yourself to, but it's also very unfamiliar. And there's something maybe a little bit, I think both of them, about this sense of the uncanny that it evokes in the audience. So Lily, for those who haven't seen your film yet and are tuning in, can you talk a little bit about your film as well?
Yeah, Preparations to Be Together for an Unknown Period of Time. It has a really long title, and it's my second feature. And it premiered at Venice Film Festival, and then it went to Toronto, and now it's playing in Chicago and in Busan next week. So it really has a nice international journey in this very strange year. And should I tell a bit about the film, what it's about? It's about a 40-year-old woman who's a brilliant neurosurgeon living in the United States, but she's Hungarian, and she made a big career as a doctor abroad, and she comes back to Budapest, her native her hometown, because she'd met a man at a conference in New Jersey, and she fell in love with him, and she comes back to Budapest because he's Hungarian, and she comes back to Budapest to reunite with him. And we see her arrival, her preparing to their date, and they have a rendezvous at the Liberty Bridge in Budapest, which is a beautiful spot. And there we see her standing and waiting in vain for the man who doesn't show up. And then the woman goes to look after him, so where he can be, and then when she finally finds him at his workplace and she calls his name, then the man says, pardon me, this is the first time I see you in my life. You must be mistaking me for someone else. And that's how our story starts. And from then on, reality is a question throughout the story, because she stays in Budapest and she gets a job there at a Budapest hospital and tries to find out where the truth is. Yeah.
Great. One of the things that I often note, and I don't know the answer. I mean, I just heard a little bit from Giampaolo about this, but that I don't know the answer for you, Lily, because we haven't talked about this, is oftentimes I think with particularly with first films, but it also maybe with first and second films, is that you have a sense that there's something of the personal in them, more so with maybe a filmmaker that's on his or her 8th or 9th film, right? And so I guess I just wanted to ask that question, is like, is there something, whether it's kind of from your own particular background or your own story or someone you're connected with, or is it very much connected with a place where you feel like there's something personal or a part of you that's very much, besides like that you wrote the film, that's a part of these films?
Yeah, I think that it is essential that there is something personal, and I can only hope that even when making my 7th or 8th film, there will still be something personal in those films. But in this film, it's quite hidden, I guess. So I never stood at the Liberty Bridge waiting in vain for a man. But and this is, of course, an extreme situation we are showing in the film. But this film is very much about the role of projection in the nature of love. That when we are falling in love with someone else, then we project a lot of things onto him or her, and Yeah, and it tells a lot more about us, I think, than of the other person. And when finally a real relationship begins, then we have to synchronize this projected image with the actual person. And I think I have a strong experience for that, and in this way it's totally personal, and but I think that most people do have experiences for that. And now the film is screening in Hungarian cinemas. It's been released a month ago, and I keep getting messages every day from unknown people that this happened to me. This is the but that is the essence they are writing, and it's not that they are nuts, or so yeah, that's
but they're really connecting with it on a personal level as well.
Yeah.
And Gianpaolo, you were saying kind of the area that you grew up in, so the backdrop of your film is really this conflict between the migrant worker, your lead character, who comes from the north to work in kind of this more industrialized but also fascist kind of community in the south, and that you grew up in a community like that. But so, underlying it feels like there's something very personal there, but you're also making a comment on the current kind of cultural, political, and social situation in Brazil right now. But I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that personal element of
Yeah, sure. So as I said, I came from the countryside, a very conservative religion family, so was very complicated sometimes, because in Brazil, everybody thinks that Brazil it's like one paradise with the carnival, and everyone have a free mind, open mind, and to say the truth, it's the opposite. Of course, we had, and we are seeing now, they supported the Bolsonaro, for example, and so they elected one very conservative president, and so a good part of Brazil, the families and the more middle class and rich ones, they really think they are very different from the other ones. So we can see very easily the north, as I said, like from Indian and African descendants, and the south more like European descendants. Of course, we have these contracts everywhere in Brazil too. And now, in this situation, in this moment, in this government that we are living now, we can see they are showing their face. So that kind of uncle or grandmother who don't like to see black people, for example, now they are having support. So, for example, as I said, my first girlfriend was a black girl, and I showed her in my birthday when I was like 15 years old, and then I showed, and when I kissed her, my grandmother stand up and came to clean my mouth, for example. So, and other situations that I can tell. So it's something very tough and very strong and difficult to remember, because something that came from my past, the family, friends, and people who lives very near to me. So the film is so personal to say about that. And of course, it's one moment that we are living now that we cannot ignore, or only to tell one light story in the beach in Copacabana, Rio de Janeiro. So it's something that now us, like the artists, we really need to face. So of course I am starting now, but the other filmmakers in Brazil, it's doing one very strong fight too. So came from something personal. So, but now it's coming like a glove with all the situation that we are seeing now in Brazil.
Yeah, I mean, the personal is political, particularly in this case. So we also heard from Gianpaolo kind of his journey as a filmmaker, where he was making short films on his, the first one was on your phone, Gianpaolo, for less than $300 and submitted to Cannes and was accepted to Critics Week. And the second one for even less and was in the main competition of the short film program at Cannes. But Lily, could you talk a little bit about your journey into filmmaking? And
yeah, it's a classical way, I guess. My way. I went to a good high school in Budapest, and then I went to Paris with my family because my father was a guest professor at the Sorbonne back then, and I spent 1 year there and went to the Sorbonne Nouvelle as well and studied audiovisual arts, but it was more theory than practice, and then I came back home to to apply for film school here. There is basically we are a small country, and there's basically one good film school in the country, and I got accepted right away, which was a big deal because it was like 5 students every 2 years that got accepted, and so there was no question that I would come back and not stay in Paris any longer. So I was quite young, and so there were no big questions, and then it was a 5-year university, and I made a couple of short films, and they became quite successful, but not on this level. So it didn't. I don't know how long your short films are, but my own short films were always extended somehow the limits of calling them short. It was always rather middle length and like 30 minutes, which is not a practical length if you want them to fit in big festivals. So my diploma film was screened in Sarajevo, which was also very nice, and then I made my first feature, which was funded by the Hungarian National Film Fund, and it was partly a German co-production, and it premiered at Carlo Vivari at 2015, and then it won a big award, and from then on it had also a nice festival journey.
Great. So I guess I just wanted just a few more minutes to talk about kind of what's next for both of you. You know, as I mentioned at the top with Gianpaolo, and with you when you came in, Lily, I want to encourage audiences to watch your films if they haven't seen them. I think both kind of for me, there's kind of for both of them, even though Gianpaolo, you talk about, of course, that it's reflecting a reality, but there seems to be, I think, and I think a lot of it is kind of the cultural background and or kind of what the house represents, right? The memory house does, is there's a sense of this kind of mysterious or the uncanny or forces at work that we can't see that are empowering him, right? And also similarly yours, Lily, I think there's this sense of unease or uncanny as we're brought in and trying to figure out as an audience member kind of what the reality of the situation is. So I just want to encourage audience to see them and just have you talk a little bit about maybe kind of what you're working on right now and what's next for you both.
Oh,
we should start.
Start you first.
So it's me first. Okay. Now I'm at an early stage of development of my next screenplay, and it's a contemporary adaptation of the Pygmalion story. And it's I'm a bit afraid of telling more about that, but in a way it's an emancipation story of a woman. But it's more based on the original version of Ovid than of G.B. Shaw.
Great. And Gianpaolo?
Oh, now I am writing 2 scripts. One that I will make in Amazon rainforest.
Okay.
So it's my next long film, and so it will be a story about one Indian that imagine or see himself like white. So me being part of the white society and capitalist society. So it's a very polemic character, but in the same time, it's one way to try to bring one kind of revenge from Amazon and from the forest and nature. So it's one subject very strong now in my country, and I think the world is looking to the Amazon too now. And so it's about this. It's one story that came in one time from my father. My father had one kind of dream, but and I give several years ago one idea, one dream that he had. So this is one story, and the second one it's a very different one, but it's original that I am writing to film in US. Okay. So it's the third long film in US, but it's completely different, but it's original that I am writing now too.
Great. Well, I wanted to thank you both, one, for joining us here this morning, and also for sharing your films with the audience. So again, it's Lily Horvath from Preparations to Be Together for an Unknown Period of Time. Thank you, Lily. And Gianpaolo Miranda Maria, whose Memory House is in the festival as well, from Brazil. And as I mentioned, both films are in our new directors competition. And I'm so excited that audiences here in the US get to see both of your films. And thank you for joining us. And hopefully we'll welcome you personally in Chicago sometime in the near future.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank
Bye.
you. Ciao.